The Aurora, a battered transport ship, hung crippled in the black void, its life support systems teetering on the brink. 3 hulking warships, their hulls adorned with the jagged teeth of the Krill Confederacy, circled like vultures. Inside the Aurora's engine room, alarms blared like dying gulls, their shrill cries echoing off scorched metal and sparking conduits. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of coolant and the acrid bite of ozone. Anthony Clark, the ship's chief engineer, wrestled with a tangle of severed wires, his face slick with sweat under the flickering emergency lights. He cursed under his breath, the words lost in the cacophony of failing machinery. "Damn meteoroid," he muttered, yanking at a fused plasma regulator. Right where it hurts. He knew time was running out. The failing life support meant dwindling oxygen and a chilling drop in temperature, slowly turning the ship into a floating tomb for his crew. Outside, the Krill warships loomed, their predatory silhouettes a stark reminder of the Aurora's vulnerability. Each vessel bristled with weapon emplacements, their energy cannons glowing with contained power, promising swift and brutal annihilation. The Aurora, a mere transport ship, stood no chance against such overwhelming firepower. Anthony paused, wiping his brow with a grease-stained rag. "Status report." He barked into his comm link, his voice strained. "Life support at 60% and dropping, sir," came the reply from Lieutenant Phillips, her voice tight with anxiety. "Engine still offline. We've rerouted auxiliary power, but it's not enough." "Keep at it, Phillips," Anthony replied, forcing a note of optimism into his voice. "We're not done yet." He knew the odds were stacked against them, but he refused to surrender hope. The Aurora transmitted a distress signal, a desperate plea hurled into the vast emptiness of space, directed towards any potential allies, including the distant Earth Command. But the signal was weak, and the Krill presence made rescue a distant, improbable dream. Suddenly, a crackle of static filled the comms, followed by a chillingly smug voice. "Attention, Vessel Aurora," the voice boomed, filled with a guttural accent. "This is Commander Elysian of the Krill Confederacy. Your situation is unfortunate. Resistance is futile. Prepare to be boarded and dismantled. Your swift end is assured." Anthony spat on the deck. "Not if I have anything to say about it." He knew bravado wouldn't win this fight, but it was all he had left. He keyed the comm again. "Phillips, prepare for emergency evacuation. Get the crew to the escape pods, that's an order." He paused, his voice softening. Tell them I'm sorry." As the crew began the grim task of preparing for their likely demise, a new alarm blared on the bridge, its insistent wail cutting through the despair. "Unknown vessel detected, Captain." Phillips's voice crackled over the comms, imbued with a hint of surprise. Small, derelict escape pod drifting nearby. An escape pod? Anthony frowned, his mind racing. Where did it come from? "Unknown, sir. It's heavily damaged, looks like it's been drifting for quite some time." "Any life signs?" Anthony asked, a flicker of hope igniting within him. "Negative, sir. Wait. I'm getting a faint reading now. Very faint. Possible life sign detected." Anthony hesitated. Every watt of power, every second of time was precious. Diverting resources to investigate a derelict pod could mean the difference between life and death for his own crew, but the thought of abandoning a potential survivor gnawed at him. "Reroute minimal power to the derelict pod's life support scanner," he ordered, his voice firm despite the turmoil within him. "Let's see what we're dealing with, but keep the engine repairs a priority. We can't afford to waste any more time." The scanner whirred to life, bathing the bridge in an eerie green glow. A series of complex readings flashed across the screen, followed by a synthesized voice. "Occupant identified, Saurian, species designation, Lacertus bellator, condition, critical, stasis pod integrity compromised." Anthony's eyes widened. A Saurian. The reptilian species were renowned throughout the galaxy for their fierce warriors and unwavering loyalty. What was one doing out here, drifting in a derelict pod, On board the lead Krill warship, Commander Elysian snarled, his reptilian eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Report," he barked at his comms officer. "Commander, we have confirmed the presence of the Saurian female on board the transport vessel Aurora." Elysian's grin widened, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Excellent. Juno, the rogue scientist, just as predicted, she will pay for her treachery." He slammed a fist on the command console. "Once the Aurora is disabled, prepare a boarding party. I want her alive. Her genetic code is too valuable to lose." Back on the Aurora, Anthony issued a new order, his voice filled with urgency. "Get that Saurian out of the stasis pod. Now. I want to know what we're dealing with before the Krill arrive." As the crew struggled to extract the stasis pod, alarms blared again, even louder this time. "Warning, power fluctuations detected, life support failing, containment breach." Phillips's voice was frantic. "Sir, the Saurian's physiology is interfering with our systems. Her genetic structure is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's causing cascading failures throughout the ship." The situation, already desperate, had just taken a turn for the worse. Enemies could become allies. A high-pitched whine sliced through the Aurora, followed by the sputtering cough of dying lights. Sections of the ship plunged into darkness, the emergency lighting casting long, distorted shadows. The air grew thin, a metallic tang stinging Anthony's nostrils. Juno's genetic anomaly was wreaking havoc, overloading the life support systems. "Report," Anthony barked, his voice echoing in the diminished hum of the ship. "Life support failing in sections 3 through 7, Captain." A voice crackled over the comms, strained with panic. "Oxygen levels critical." Anthony cursed under his breath. The engines were already on life support. Now this. "Divert all available power from the engine core to life support," he ordered, knowing the risk. Now, the ship groaned in protest as power shifted, the flickering lights dimming further. He could feel the vibration of the failing engine core lessening, the Aurora drifting further into the Krill's grasp. "Captain, are you sure about this?" A crew member, Davies, challenged, his face pale in the emergency lighting. "The engines are barely holding on as it is. We need to get out of here." "And how do you propose we do that, Davies?" Anthony snapped, his patience wearing thin. "Drift into the Krill's waiting arms. That Saurian might be our only chance. She might know something, anything that can help us." "Help us? She's an alien, Captain. For all we know, she caused this." Another voice chimed in, filled with fear. Anthony rounded on them, his eyes blazing. "She's wounded, unconscious, and more importantly alive. We made a choice to help her, and I expect you to stick with it. She could know how to fix this ship, or how to fight those Krill bastards. Are you going to give up just because things got difficult?" He paused, letting his gaze sweep over their faces. "I didn't think so." He turned back to Juno, her reptilian features stark under the harsh light. Her breathing was shallow and ragged. He needed to stabilize her, and fast. He activated the medical scanner, its blue light washing over her. Complex genetic code scrolled across the screen, a chaotic mess of data. A warning flashed: rapid cellular degeneration, DETECTED. "What the hell is that?" Anthony muttered, his brow furrowed. "Captain," a voice called from the science station, "I'm getting a positive ID on the Saurian." It's Juno, a high-ranking member of the Saurian Royal Guard. She was considered one of their top bioweapon specialists before she disappeared. Bioweapon specialist. The words hung heavy in the air. Distrust, previously simmering, began to boil. Further scans confirmed their worst fears. A biosignature in Juno's blood, a compound matching a known Krill bioweapon formula. The pieces were falling into place, painting a disturbing picture. On the Krill warship Dominator, Commander Elysian snarled, his mandibles clicking in anticipation. "The Saurian life sign is confirmed. Move to attack positions. Capture is priority, but do not hesitate to eliminate any human resistance." He paused, a cruel glint in his multifaceted eyes. "The genetic secrets she possesses are too valuable to lose." The Dominator and its sister ships lumbered forward, their energy cannons powering up. A small, metallic probe detached from the lead ship, silently accelerating towards the Aurora. Its objective: to disable the human ship's remaining defenses, paving the way for a boarding party. Back on the Aurora, Anthony felt a tremor run through the ship. "Report. We're being targeted, Captain," the sensor operator shouted. "Krill probe incoming. It's heading straight for our defense systems." Anthony swore. They were running out of time. "Reroute all available power to the external sensors. I want a lock on that probe." The ship shuddered again as the last operational defense turret swung into position, its targeting reticle locking onto the approaching probe. With a desperate burst of energy, the turret fired. A beam of raw power lanced through space, striking the probe dead center. The probe exploded in a shower of metallic fragments, buying them a few precious minutes. As the alarms blared, Anthony returned to Juno. He noticed something he'd missed before, a faint outline beneath her skin near her temple. He adjusted the scanner, focusing on the area, a neural implant. "She has classified knowledge," he realized, his mind racing. About the Krill, about their technology, maybe even about that bioweapon. He knew the risks. A neural interface could be fatal both for him and for Juno, but they were out of options. He had to try. He prepped the neural interface equipment, his hands shaking slightly. He connected the probes to Juno's temples, the machine humming to life. He initiated the sequence, his heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly, images flooded his mind. Fragmented scenes of a sterile white facility, filled with strange machinery. He saw a shadowed figure, its face obscured, torturing Juno. He saw test tubes filled with swirling, iridescent liquid, a Krill bioweapon facility. As the images intensified, Juno's body convulsed, a surge of energy coursing through her. Her eyes snapped open, her reptilian pupils dilated. She gasped, a single word escaping her lips, barely a whisper: "Betrayal." Then darkness. The neural interface shut down, the Aurora shaking violently as weapons fire slammed into its shields. Alarms blared, a discordant symphony of impending doom. Red lights strobed across the engineering bay, painting the frantic faces of the crew in a hellish glow. Hull breaches, pinpointed by screaming alarms, had ripped through decks 4 and 5. The sickening hiss of decompression ripped through the ship, punctuated by desperate cries swallowed by the void. "Seal bulkheads," Anthony roared, his voice barely audible above the din. "Sections 4 and 5 are lost. Seal them now." His order hung in the air, thick with the unspoken truth. Sealing those bulkheads meant condemning anyone trapped within. He saw the faces of Miller, the young ensign fresh out of training, and old Vargas, the grizzled mechanic who'd kept the Aurora running for 30 years. Gone. But there was no other choice. He hardened his face, the metallic tang of blood filling his mouth where he'd bitten his lip. Lives had to be traded to save lives. The order went out, and with a grinding screech the bulkhead slammed shut. Later, in the relative quiet of the security station, Anthony ran the footage from Juno's escape pod launch again and again. Her face, gaunt and pale, filled the screen. Her last words, distorted by static, echoed in his mind. "They betrayed us." Who were they? The Krill, her own people. Or someone else entirely? He zoomed in on her eyes, searching for a flicker of truth, a hint of deception. But there was nothing, only pain and exhaustion. The ship's engineer, a wiry man named Phillips, burst into the room, his face etched with worry. "Captain, the main communication array. It's been sabotaged. Looks like someone cut the power conduits. We can't send a distress signal." Anthony's gaze snapped to Phillips. "Sabotaged? Are you sure?" "Positive, Captain. Clean cuts. Someone knew what they were doing." His eyes drifted back to the image of Juno on the screen. Suspicion, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of his exhaustion. Had he been a fool to trust her, or was she a pawn in a larger game? He found her in the med bay, still unconscious, her chest rising and falling shallowly. He stood over her, his hands clenched into fists. "Juno, he said, his voice low and tight. Why sabotage the comms? Were you working with them all along? He knew she couldn't answer, but he needed to say it to voice the doubt that gnawed at him. He reached out, his fingers hovering over the neural implant at her temple. He needed answers, and he needed them now. Prepare for neural extraction, he ordered the med techs, his voice devoid of emotion. I want everything she knows. I don't care about the risks. The med techs exchanged uneasy glances. Captain, this could cause permanent brain damage, one of them protested. It's unethical. We're running out of time, Anthony snapped. Our people are dying, do it. The procedure was brutal, a violation. Anthony watched as the machine whirred and clicked, siphoning data from Juno's mind. Images flashed across the screen. Juno in Saurian armor, training with other warriors. Juno arguing with a group of Saurian elders. Juno witnessing the construction of a monstrous weapon, a bioweapon of unimaginable power. He saw her horror, her disgust, her desperate attempt to stop it. She was part of a covert faction that opposed the weapon, that saw the Krill as a threat to the entire galaxy. She hadn't betrayed them, she was trying to save them. A tactical schematic flashed across the screen, a blueprint of a Krill warship. A section of the shield matrix was highlighted in red. Vulnerability, a voice whispered in his ear, Juno's voice. Focused energy weapons. Bypass the shields. At this point. Commander Elysian's voice crackled over the comms, cold and devoid of emotion. Prepare boarding parties, target the Aurora's core, secure the device. On the bridge, panic surged. The Krill were coming. They're launching boarding ships, Phillips yelled. They're equipped with cutting torches. Anthony barked orders. Divert all power to the mining lasers. I want those boarding ships vaporized. He had an idea, a desperate gamble based on Juno's intel. In engineering, Anthony worked feverishly, rerouting power conduits, modifying the mining lasers into makeshift energy weapons. Sparks flew as he welded, his face streaked with grime and sweat. Juno's words echoed in his mind. Focused energy weapons. The modified mining lasers roared to life, bathing the engineering bay in an eerie blue light. They fired, lancing out into the void, striking one of the boarding ship's dead center. The ship exploded in a blinding flash of light and debris. One down, Phillips shouted, a flicker of hope in his eyes. But the others, they're still coming. The remaining boarding ships, undeterred, latched onto the Aurora's hull. The screech of metal against metal filled the ship as the Krill began cutting through the outer layers. Alarms blared, warning of imminent hull breaches. All hands brace for impact. Anthony yelled, prepare for close-quarters combat, this is it. He grabbed a plasma rifle from the armory, the cold metal a reassuring weight in his hands. He rallied a group of crew members, their faces pale but determined. They want the core, he said. We're not going to let them have it. Defend engineering at all costs. Just then Juno stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and disoriented. The device, she gasped, her voice weak. They want to disable the failsafe. Anthony rushed to her side. What failsafe? What are you talking about? The bioweapon. She croaked. It has a failsafe. To destroy it. If it falls into the wrong hands, the Krill, they know they want to disable it, so they can use the weapon. Where is it? Anthony demanded. The core. Juno struggled to sit up, her face contorted in pain. Only I know how to arm it properly. Despite her weakened state, she pushed herself to her feet. I have to go, she insisted. I have to stop them. Anthony hesitated. He needed every able-bodied crew member to defend engineering, but Juno's information was crucial. He made a split-second decision. Phillips, take command here. I'm going to the core. He looked at Juno, her face pale but resolute. Let's go. We have a failsafe to arm. But those tunnels are not on any human schematics. They were built by the original Saurian engineers who constructed this vessel. Before. Juno paused, her brow furrowed in pain. Before the integration. A metallic screech echoed down the corridor, followed by the distinct thud of heavy boots. They're through the first barricade. A voice yelled from the comms. "No time for history lessons," Anthony snapped, grabbing a plasma torch. "Juno, those tunnels, now." As the Krill boarded Anthony's team, a ragtag group of engineers and security personnel scrambled to implement their hastily prepared defenses. Corridors were flooded with coolant, energized by jury-rigged power conduits, creating deadly electrical fields. Makeshift barricades of overturned equipment and welded metal plates slowed the Krill advance, buying precious time. Juno, despite her injuries, moved with a surprising agility. "This way," she rasped, leading Anthony through a barely visible seam in the wall paneling. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for Anthony to squeeze through, and the air was thick with the smell of ozone and decay. "How do you know about this?" Anthony asked, his voice echoing in the cramped space. "Saurian design," Juno replied, her voice strained. "We always have. Escape routes." They pressed on, crawling through the claustrophobic tunnel, the sounds of battle muffled but ever present. They soon encountered a small pocket of surviving crew members huddled in a maintenance junction. Among them was a wiry, middle-aged technician named Marcus, his arm pinned beneath a fallen console. "Clark," Marcus gasped, his face pale with pain. "Thank God, or whoever's listening, I know the failsafe arming sequence, but I can't." He gestured weakly at his crushed arm. "We'll get you out of here," Anthony said, his voice firm. "Can you tell me the sequence?" Marcus grimaced. "It requires a specific Saurian tool, a resonance key. It interfaces with the core's energy matrix." Juno shook her head. "I do not have it. Such tools are only for core engineers." Anthony's eyes scanned the junction, landing on a battered 3D printer tucked away in a corner. "Wait a minute. Juno, can you give me the specs for this resonance key?" Juno hesitated. "It is complex. The energy conduits must be exact." "We can modify the printer," Anthony insisted, his mind racing. "Use the Aurora schematics to reroute the energy flow. Combine human and Saurian engineering. We can do this." "The printer is in Sector 4, Marcus wheezed. "Under heavy assault." "Then we make a detour," Anthony said grimly, checking the charge on his plasma torch. "Juno, lead the way." The route to the 3D printer was a gauntlet of fire and death. Krill warriors, clad in their chitinous armor, poured through the breached bulkheads, their energy weapons spitting bolts of searing plasma. Anthony and Juno fought back to back, a whirlwind of improvised weaponry and Saurian ferocity. Anthony's plasma torch melted through armor, while Juno's claws tore through flesh. They moved with a desperate efficiency, knowing that every second counted. Reaching the 3D printer, they found it miraculously intact, but the power fluctuations caused by the battle damage were wreaking havoc with its systems. Sparks flew from the control panel, and error messages flashed across the screen. "Damn it," Anthony muttered, pounding his fist on the console. "We need a manual override, recalibrate the energy matrix. It requires direct access to the reactor conduits," Juno said, her voice grave. "The radiation, it will be significant." Without hesitation, Anthony grabbed a wrench and began dismantling the access panel. "Someone has to do it," he said, his face set with unyielding commitment. "Cover me." Juno watched, her reptilian eyes narrowed as Anthony worked, radiation warnings blaring. She saw not just a human but a warrior, a leader, willing to sacrifice himself for the survival of others. Finally, with a shower of sparks, Anthony bypassed the safety protocols. The 3D printer whirred back to life, its nozzle extruding a stream of molten metal. "It is working," Juno exclaimed. Anthony staggered back, clutching his head. Get it done," he gasped, his skin already beginning to flush red. The printer finished its work, producing a gleaming, intricately designed Saurian tool. Anthony grabbed it, his hands shaking. He was already feeling the effects of the radiation. "We need to get to the core," he said, his voice weak. They reached the Aurora's core, finding it heavily guarded by a Krill commander and his elite soldiers. The commander, a hulking figure with glowing red eyes, sneered at them. So, the vermin dare to crawl into my domain, he hissed. You will die here. Juno roared, charging forward, her claws extended. Go, I will hold them. Anthony hesitated, then nodded, dragging the injured Marcus towards the failsafe mechanism. Juno engaged the Krill commander and his elite soldiers in a furious battle, her Saurian agility and combat prowess a match for their superior numbers. She moved with a grace that belied her injuries, deflecting blows and delivering lethal strikes. Marcus, despite his pain, guided Anthony through the arming sequence, his voice growing weaker with each passing moment. Insert the resonance key into the energy matrix, then rotate the dial clockwise. Suddenly, a bolt of plasma fire struck Marcus, killing him instantly. The Krill commander, having broken free from Juno's assault, stood over them, his weapon smoking. Foolish humans, he snarled. You cannot stop us. Juno, enraged by the death of the technician, lunged at the commander, engaging him in a brutal close-quarters fight. She fought with a ferocity born of desperation, but the commander was too strong, too well armored. He slammed her against the wall, her body crumpling to the floor. Anthony, his body racked with pain from the radiation, knew he had only one chance. He grabbed the resonance key and, following Marcus's incomplete instructions, desperately tried to complete the arming sequence. The mechanism sparked and sputtered, threatening to overload. With a final surge of strength, Anthony forced the key into place and rotated the dial. A klaxon blared and a holographic display flickered to life, showing a countdown timer. Failsafe. Armed, Anthony gasped, collapsing to the floor. The bioweapon is useless to you now. As the failsafe activated, a garbled message crackled through the ship's damaged comm system. Earth, vessels, approaching, Krill, fleet. The message was abruptly cut off by static. The Aurora's engines were beyond repair, but Juno, regaining consciousness, spoke, her voice strained. There is one escape shuttle, barely functional, navigation damaged. I have coordinates, Saurian outpost, safe haven, but the route, treacherous, precise calculations, needed. Anthony shoved the last of the sensor equipment into the escape shuttle, the cramped space already overflowing with bodies. That's it, he yelled over the din of alarms and panicked voices. No more room. A young woman, barely out of her teens, stepped forward, her face streaked with grime and tears. I'll stay, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Someone has to keep the comms open in case. She didn't finish the sentence. No one needed her to. Another crew member, a grizzled veteran named Marcus, placed a hand on her shoulder. Go, he said, his voice rough but kind. I've had a good run. He turned to Anthony. Get them out of here, engineer. Anthony swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. Let's go, he barked, sealing the hatch. The shuttle shuddered as its engines sputtered to life, struggling against the Aurora's weakening gravity. The navigation system flickered erratically. Damn it. Anthony banged his hand against the console. Navigation's shot to hell. Juno, slumped in a corner, her breathing shallow and ragged, stirred slightly. Saurian, protocols, she rasped, her voice barely audible. I guide. Anthony knelt beside her, his brow furrowed with concern. Can you? You're in no shape. Must, she insisted, her eyes blazing with a fierce dedication that belied her weakened state. Only chance? He trusted her, he had to. With Juno whispering instructions, her reptilian fingers tracing patterns on a makeshift interface, Anthony coaxed the damaged system back to life. The shuttle lurched forward, leaving the crippled Aurora behind. Minutes later, a klaxon blared. Krill patrol ship, the pilot announced, his voice tight with fear. Closing fast. Anthony glanced at Juno, her face pale and drawn. Stealth mode, he ordered, activating the shuttle's limited cloaking capabilities. The power fluctuated, the lights dimming ominously. Won't hold, Juno gasped. Not long. They held their breath, the silence broken only by the hum of the engines and the frantic beating of their hearts. The Krill ship passed overhead, its shadow looming large against the starfield. They're gone, the pilot breathed, relief washing over his face. For now. But the relief was short-lived. The shuttle's power flickered again, then died completely. "We're losing power," the pilot yelled. "Life support is failing." As the shuttle limped towards the coordinates of the Earth vessels, a squadron of Krill fighters appeared on the radar. "We've been intercepted." Then, a miracle. 3 blips appeared on the sensors, growing larger with each passing second. "Unidentified vessels," the pilot announced. "Bearing, friendly." The Earth vessels decloaked, revealing themselves to be small, seemingly defenseless transport ships. The Krill fighters, arrogant and overconfident, swooped in for the kill. "Fools," Anthony muttered, watching the attack on the monitors. The Krill fighters unleashed a barrage of energy weapons, but the Earth ships simply vanished, reappearing moments later behind their attackers. Then bolts of pure energy erupted from the Earth ships, slamming into the Krill fighters. EMP bursts. The Krill fighters sputtered and died, their systems fried by the electromagnetic pulse. But the EMP weapons had taken their toll. The escape shuttle systems flickered violently, then went dark. One of the Earth vessels moved in, extending a magnetic tow cable. "We've got you," a voice crackled over the comms. "Prepare for tow." As the Earth vessel pulled them away from the wreckage of the Krill fighters, Anthony checked on Juno. Her breathing was shallow and erratic, her skin clammy. "She needs medical attention," he said urgently. "We're en route to a secure location," the Earth captain replied. "But it's several hours away. We can't provide adequate medical care here." "She won't last that long," Anthony pleaded. "You don't understand, she's the key, the failsafe on the bioweapon." The Earth captain was silent for a moment. "I'll consult with my superiors." Minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, the captain's voice returned. "We have a compromise, a risky jump through the Xylos Nebula. It's closer to a medical station, but it's less secure. Are you willing to take the risk?" Anthony looked at Juno, her life hanging by a thread. "We have no choice." As they entered the nebula, a swirling vortex of gas and dust, alarms blared once more. "We're being ambushed," the captain yelled. "Krill warship, heavily shielded against EMP attacks. They disabled our cloaking." The Krill warship loomed out of the nebula, its weapons trained on the Earth vessels. "Prepare to be boarded." A guttural voice boomed over the comms. The Earth vessels braced for a last stand, their small weapons firing defiantly at the massive warship. Juno, her eyes flickering open, reached out a trembling hand. "Hidden compartment," she whispered. "Behind my seat." Anthony fumbled behind Juno's seat, his fingers brushing against a small panel. He pried it open, revealing a sleek metallic weapon. "Saurian energy weapon," Juno gasped. "Powerful, but unstable." She coughed, blood trickling from her lips. "Aim for the reactor core." Cryptic instructions followed her coughs like a dying language. "Only chance, but be warned. It could all explode." Juno gasped, a rattling, wet sound that clawed its way from her throat. Her reptilian eyes, usually sharp and calculating, fluttered wildly. Anthony caught her as she slumped, her armored body heavy in his arms. "Medical," he yelled, his voice cracking. "Now." The Earth medical officer, a young woman with tired eyes and a grim set to her jaw, rushed over, her medkit clattering against her leg. "What happened?" "I don't know," Anthony said, his voice tight with panic. "She just collapsed. Her breathing is shallow, her pulse is erratic." The medical officer scanned Juno with a handheld device. "Her biosigns are crashing. Her genetic anomaly is accelerating. I can't do much for her with what I have here. We need a proper medical bay and fast." A shudder ran through the shuttle, alarms blared. "Incoming fire." A voice screamed over the comms. "Shields failing." The medical officer swore. "I need to stabilize her. Can you give me some space?" Anthony nodded, his gaze hardening. "I'll buy you some time." He grabbed the plasma torch he'd modified earlier. It felt clumsy in his hand, but it was the best he had. "All hands repel boarders." The Earth captain's voice, strained but resolute, echoed through the shuttle. This is a losing battle, but we'll make them pay for every inch. Anthony hesitated, torn between staying with Juno and defending the shuttle. He looked at the medical officer, her face etched with worry. "Do what you can," he said. "I'll be back." He moved towards the cockpit, the shuttle rocking violently as the Krill warship unleashed another barrage. The captain, a grizzled veteran named Eva Rostova, gripped the controls, her fingers tightening. "They're tearing us apart, Clark. Shields are gone. Hull integrity is at 20%. "What about our weapons?" Anthony asked. "Offline, fried by that EMP blast they hit us with. We're sitting ducks." Rostova glanced at the plasma torch in Anthony's hand. "What's that supposed to do against a warship?" "It's all I've got," Anthony said grimly. He eyed the Saurian energy weapon, still inert in the corner. "What about that thing? Can we use it?" Rostova shook her head. "Absolutely not. That's alien tech, Clark. We don't know what it does. It could blow us all to kingdom come." "It might be our only chance," Anthony argued. "Not a chance I'm willing to take," Rostova snapped. "My priority is the safety of my crew." A memory flashed through Anthony's mind. Juno, her voice weak but determined, explaining the weapon's origins. Flashback: Juno, lying on a makeshift bed, her face pale, spoke haltingly. "The weapon. It was created by my people. Long ago, a desperate measure. For a doomed colony, the Krill. They attacked without warning. They sought to take our resources, our technology. We were outmatched, outgunned." She coughed, a spasm of pain contorting her face. "The weapon. It draws energy from the user and the surrounding environment. It is unstable, unpredictable, but it is also powerful enough to destroy a warship." Anthony frowned. "Why didn't you use it?" Juno's eyes flickered with sadness. "There was no one left strong enough to wield it, and without a stabilizer, it would have destroyed us all." End flashback: The screech of metal tearing echoed through the shuttle. "They're cutting through the hull," Rostova yelled. "Brace for impact." Anthony glanced at the control panel for the Saurian weapon. The cryptic symbols swam before his eyes. He remembered Juno's instructions, but something was missing. A critical component to stabilize the energy flow. He ripped open a panel on the damaged Earth ship's energy weapon systems, sparks flying as he tore out wires and circuits. Rostova stared at him, her face a mask of disbelief. "What are you doing, Clark? Are you crazy?" "Improvising," Anthony said, his fingers working furiously. "It's what we do." He began to splice the Earth technology into the Saurian weapon, hoping against hope that it would work. It was a desperate gamble, but Juno's life, and the lives of everyone on board, depended on it. The shuttle shuddered as the first wave of Krill boarders poured through the breach. Rostova and a handful of remaining crew members opened fire, their weapons spitting energy bolts that tore through the cramped corridor. Krill warriors, their chitinous armor gleaming in the flickering light, fell, but more kept coming. Anthony ignored the chaos around him, his focus laser locked on the weapon. He completed the modification, sweat dripping from his brow. The weapon hummed with barely controlled energy, its casing glowing with an ominous light. It was highly unstable, ready to explode at the slightest touch. Juno stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at Anthony, her gaze clear and focused. "The code," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The final sequence. You must enter it. Now." She spoke a series of guttural clicks and whistles, a language that resonated deep within Anthony's mind. Anthony input the code, his fingers trembling. The weapon vibrated violently, threatening to tear itself apart. He braced himself, knowing that this was it. Life or death, salvation or destruction. Rostova, seeing the weapon primed and ready, understood what Anthony was about to do. "Clear the area," she roared, shoving crew members aside. "Get behind me, now." Without hesitation, she and the remaining crew formed a human shield around Anthony, sacrificing themselves to give him a clear shot. Rostova met Anthony's gaze, a flicker of respect in her eyes. "Good luck, Clark," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Anthony took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He raised the weapon, aimed it at the krill warship looming outside the shuttle, and pulled the trigger. A blinding surge of energy erupted from the weapon, engulfing the shuttle in a white-hot light. The world dissolved into chaos. The krill warship screamed as the energy blast slammed into its shields. The shields overloaded, buckling and collapsing under the force of the impact. The energy ripped through the ship's hull, tearing it apart like paper. The warship, crippled but not destroyed, drifted helplessly in space. The escape shuttle was rocked violently by the energy surge, its hull groaning under the strain. More systems failed. Lights flickered and died. The air grew thick with smoke and the smell of burning metal. Anthony stumbled, his ears ringing, his vision blurred. He looked down at Juno. Her eyes were closed. The medical officer was frantically performing CPR, her face desperate. "She's flatlining," the medical officer cried. "I can't get a pulse." Anthony knelt beside Juno, his hand hovering over her still form. "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be happening." Outside, the nebula began to react to the energy discharge. Spatial distortions rippled through the fabric of space. Energy surges arced across the swirling clouds of gas and dust. A low, resonant hum filled the void, a sound that seemed to vibrate in the very bones. Something massive, unseen, was awakening. On the bridge of the crippled Earth vessel, a lone survivor sent out a desperate distress signal. "This is the USS Valiant," he said, his voice trembling. "We have engaged the enemy but suffered heavy casualties. We have also awakened something within the nebula, an unknown threat. Request immediate assistance." An unknown threat. Request immediate assistance. Anthony smacked his palms against Juno's chest, the rhythmic compressions growing ragged. Sweat plastered his hair to his forehead, stinging his eyes. "Come on, Juno," he grunted, his breath catching in his throat. "Don't you dare give up on me now." The medical readouts remained stubbornly flat, a green line mocking his efforts. The Earth medical officer, a young woman with tired eyes, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Anthony, she's gone, clinically dead. We need to focus on the living, on getting ourselves out of this mess." He shook her off, the metallic tang of blood filling his nostrils. "No, not yet." He remembered Juno's stories, her fierce pride, the unwavering resilience of her people. Giving up wasn't an option. Not for her, not for him. Then he saw it. A faint shimmer, almost imperceptible, emanating from Juno's chest. A subtle energy signature flickering around the damaged Saurian tech embedded in her flesh. He leaned closer, his heart pounding. "What is it?" the medical officer asked, peering over his shoulder. "I don't know," Anthony breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "But something's still there." A quick analysis confirmed his suspicions. Juno's brain activity was minimal, almost non-existent. But there was a feedback loop, an energy exchange between her dormant neural pathways and the alien technology. She wasn't alive, not in any conventional sense, but she wasn't entirely gone either. Suddenly, the nebula shifted, a kaleidoscope of colors swirling with violent intensity. Another energy surge coursed through the shuttle, overloading the already strained systems. Sparks flew from a nearby console, filling the air with the acrid smell of burning plastic. A garbled voice crackled over the comms. "Earth, vessels, detected, distance, nebula interference, significant." It was a fragmented response to their distress signal. Hope quickly followed by a dose of harsh reality. "Can you make out what they're saying?" Anthony asked, his voice tight with anxiety. The communications officer worked frantically at the console. "Reinforcements, days away. Nebula, disrupting warp. Unstable, days." They didn't have days. A new alarm blared, its shrill tone cutting through the chaos. "Unidentified energy signature detected," the computer announced. "Origin, nebula, trajectory, intercept." "What is it?" Anthony demanded, his eyes darting towards the viewport. "Unknown," the sensor operator replied, his voice trembling. "Energy signature unlike anything previously recorded." Then a voice echoed in Anthony's mind, a chorus of sorrow and desperation. "Help us. Dying." World, save us. Images flooded his consciousness, a verdant planet choked by a crimson tide, its inhabitants pleading for salvation. He stumbled back, clutching his head. What? What was that? Juno's voice, raspy and weak, echoed in his memory. The Nebula Guardians. Beings of pure energy, protectors of dying star systems, my people. We destroyed them, ages ago. A fragmented flashback. Saurian warships bombarding a planet wreathed in swirling energy, the sky ablaze with emerald fire. The shuttle's life support systems flickered, then died, plunging the interior into a chilling silence. The air grew thin, the temperature plummeting. We're losing atmosphere, the medical officer warned, her voice strained. We don't have much time. Anthony stared at Juno, her face pale and still. He had a choice to make, a desperate gamble. Get me the schematics for the Earthship's damaged energy weapon, he ordered. What are you planning? The medical officer asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. That thing's a wreck. It's barely functional. I'm going to use it to amplify the energy flow between Juno's brain and those implants, Anthony said, his voice resolute. It's a long shot, but it's the only chance we've got. You're insane, the medical officer protested. You'll kill her for sure. Maybe, Anthony conceded. Or maybe it'll stabilize her, or maybe it'll allow her to communicate more clearly with whatever's out there. Suddenly, the shuttle shuddered violently. Incoming missiles. The sensor operator screamed. Krill warship closing fast. The Krill, like vultures, were returning for the kill. A volley of missiles slammed into the shuttle, rocking it violently. A hull breach erupted in the cargo bay, spewing debris into the void. Alarms blared, warning of critical system failures. Brace for impact. Anthony shouted, strapping himself into his seat. He ignored the chaos, focusing on the task at hand. He connected the damaged energy weapon to Juno's implants, his hands trembling. He initiated the energy transfer process, knowing there was no turning back. Juno's body convulsed, arching off the medical bed. Her eyes snapped open, pupils blown wide, glowing with an eerie, nebula-like energy. A guttural hiss escaped her lips. It needs us, she rasped before collapsing back into unconsciousness. Outside, in the swirling chaos of the nebula, a powerful energy pulse erupted, targeting the Krill warship. Its weapon systems flickered, then died, leaving the warship drifting helplessly in space. Juno, Anthony gripped her shoulder, shaking gently. Her eyes remained closed, her breathing shallow. A faint blue light still pulsed around her, the residue of the nebula's embrace. Juno, can you hear me? A voice crackled over the comms. Clark, report. What's the status of the alien? Does she pose a threat to our vessels? It was Captain Eva Rostova, her tone clipped and urgent. Negative, Captain, a new voice cut in. Medical scans indicate increased brain activity, but it's erratic. The signals are primarily non-saurian. It's like she's receiving a broadcast from somewhere else. A jolt ran through Anthony, not physical, but a searing flash of images in his mind. A planet, lush and vibrant, then scarred and broken. Inhabitants, alien but somehow familiar, their faces contorted in silent screams of agony. They reached out, pleading. The visions intensified, overwhelming his senses. He saw vast mining operations tearing into the heart of the planet. Gargantuan machines sucking out the planet's lifeblood. The nebula's ecosystem collapsing, species vanishing, the very air turning toxic. It was a slow, agonizing death inflicted over centuries. A voice, not Juno's but echoing with her memories, filled his mind. The Kithter. We needed the minerals for our technology, for our survival. The nebulae were resources, untapped potential. We did what we had to do. A justification, cold and pragmatic, born of necessity. The comms crackled again, Rostova's voice sharper this time. Clark, we just received a decoded Krill transmission. A larger fleet is en route. Their objective, destroy our ships and retrieve the Saurian. ETA, 20 minutes. Alarms blared throughout the shuttle. Captain, the sensor operator called out. Unusual energy fluctuations detected within the nebula. They're growing stronger off the charts. Juno's eyes snapped open, her gaze unfocused. She coughed, her voice raspy. The nebula, it's dying, the mining. They took its life force. Anthony knelt beside her, his pupils dilating. What do you mean its life force? The Kithter. They didn't just extract minerals. They harvested the nebula's core energy, the source of its very being. They treated it like a vein of ore. Rostova's voice cut through the chaos. Clark, I don't care about dying nebulae. Our primary mission is to defend Earth space. We can't afford to divert resources to some alien ecosystem. Another vision, clearer this time. A specific type of mineral, glowing with an inner light, locked away in a heavily guarded krill facility. The mineral pulsed with the same energy he felt from the nebula. Captain, Anthony pleaded, that mineral. It's the key to healing the nebula. The krill are hoarding it, exploiting it for their own weapons. We have a moral obligation to help. Moral obligation? Clark, we're about to be obliterated by a krill fleet. Our obligation is to survive. A sudden shudder rocked the shuttle. We're under attack, the pilot yelled. Comms are down, they've knocked out our primary systems. Juno struggled to sit up, her eyes blazing with persistence. There's one way. Use your ship's cloaking technology. Infiltrate the krill mining operation. Steal the minerals. Anthony stared at her, the implications sinking in. Diverting power to the cloaking device meant sacrificing repairs, reducing their chances of escape. It meant trusting a dying alien and risking everything on a desperate gamble. He looked at Juno, her face pale but resolute. He thought of the dying nebula, the silent screams in his mind. He glanced at the captain, her face grim, focused only on survival. All right, Anthony said, his voice firm. We do it. We trust Juno. We help the nebula. So that's the plan, Anthony concluded, gesturing to the holographic projection of the krill mining facility shimmering above the conference table. We get in, grab the minerals, get out. Simple. A chorus of uneasy murmurs rippled through the Earth crew. Simple for who, Commander? Boomed a voice from the back. It was Marcus, the Aurora's chief engineer. We're talking about risking the entire ship and our lives for a space whale. With all due respect, sir, we should be focusing on getting the engines back online. The engines aren't going anywhere if the krill get here first, Marcus, Anthony countered, his voice firm but measured. And it's not just about the creature. It's about stopping the krill from strip mining an entire ecosystem. They exploit everything they touch. We're not just saving a life, we're fighting against that kind of exploitation. Juno stepped forward, the holographic schematic shifting to highlight specific areas of the mining facility. The krill are predictable. Their security protocols are rigid. Their patrol routes consistent. This facility, designated Extraction Site Gamma, is heavily guarded, but there are weaknesses. She tapped a point on the schematic. Security checkpoints are located at each access tunnel. Patrol routes are highlighted in crimson. Sensors are primarily focused on detecting large vessels, not small shuttles. Anthony studied the schematic, a knot forming in his stomach. Our cloaking device. It's good, but not perfect. Krill sensors inside the facility will be much more sensitive. We'll be broadcasting a faint energy signature. I might have a solution for that, Commander, piped up Riley, the Aurora's tech specialist, from the corner of the room. I can modify the cloaking field generator to emit a low-frequency sonic pulse. It'll create interference, masking our energy signature from their sensors. It's a long shot, but it might work. Make it happen, Riley, Anthony ordered. Juno pointed to another area on the schematic, a small, almost insignificant access panel. This is a data port used for routine maintenance. It is rarely guarded. If we can access it, we can disable the facility's alarms. Riley, can you whip up a virus that'll do the trick? Anthony asked. Already on it, Commander, Riley replied, tapping away at his wrist-mounted console. Simple binary trigger bypasses the primary security protocols, should give us a clean sweep. Suddenly, Juno doubled over, a violent coughing fit racking her body. Her hand flew to her chest, her face contorted in pain. "Juno!" Anthony rushed to her side, steadying her. The coughing subsided, leaving her gasping for breath. I am fine," she rasped, waving him off. Later, in the Aurora's cramped medical bay, Dr. Phillips delivered a grim prognosis. "Her condition is deteriorating rapidly, Commander. The genetic disease. It's accelerating. She needs specialized medical attention, and soon. I can't do anything for her here." Anthony's teeth gritted. Damn it. He turned back to the briefing room, his decision made. "All right, listen up. I'm splitting the crew. A small team will accompany me and Juno to the mining facility. The rest of you will continue repairing the Aurora." Marcus thumped his hand on the table. "Are you serious, Commander? You're prioritizing an alien over your own crew. We're the ones who have been busting our asses trying to keep this ship afloat." "That's enough, Marcus," Anthony snapped, his voice hardening. "This isn't about prioritizing anyone. It's about doing what's right. We made a promise to help that creature, and we're going to keep it. Besides," he lowered his voice slightly, "Juno's knowledge of Krill systems is the only thing that gives us a chance in hell of pulling this off." He approached Marcus, his gaze unwavering. "I need you to trust me on this, Chief. I know you don't like it, but I need you to keep the Aurora running. Can you do that?" Marcus stared back, his expression a mix of anger and resignation. "Yeah, Commander, I can do that. But if this goes south, I'm holding you personally responsible." The navigation officer's voice crackled over the intercom. "Commander, updated Krill ETA. They'll reach the nebula in less than 12 hours. Time was running out. In the shuttle bay, Anthony and Juno stood before the Earth shuttle, a small, unassuming vessel dwarfed by the massive Aurora. They were armed with the modified cloaking device, the virus, a handful of pulse rifles, and a steadfast perseverance. As they strapped themselves into their seats, Juno turned to Anthony, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "Commander, I fear I will not survive this mission. My body, it is failing me." Anthony met her gaze, his expression softening. "We're going to get you through this, Juno, I promise, and we're going to save that creature." Juno managed a weak smile. "Then let us fly, Commander. Let us give them hell." The shuttle launched, its engines humming as it pierced the Aurora's launch bay and entered the swirling colors of the nebula. Ahead, looming in the distance like a metallic leviathan, was the Krill mining facility, Extraction Site Gamma. The shuttle slipped into the Krill mining facility's airspace, the hum of its modified cloaking device a constant thrum against Anthony's teeth. Outside, the facility sprawled like a metallic tumor across the asteroid's surface, a labyrinth of pipelines and docking arms glinting under the harsh glare of a distant nebula. Anthony flicked through channels on the comms panel, filtering the static until he caught snippets of Krill chatter. Recycling Unit 7 malfunctioning. Efficiency down by 12%. Maintenance crew dispatched. "That's our way in," Anthony said, pointing to a schematic of the facility. "Waste disposal access point. Less traffic than the main checkpoints." The shuttle banked sharply, plunging into the grimy depths of the waste tunnels. The air grew thick with the stench of ammonia and decay, the narrow passageways barely wider than the shuttle itself. Juno, strapped into her seat, coughed violently, her reptilian lungs struggling against the recycled air. Each rasping breath echoed in the confined space, a beacon in the darkness. "Easy, Juno," Anthony muttered, his eyes darting between the tunnel ahead and the medical readout beside her seat. Her oxygen saturation was plummeting. He ripped open a panel on the shuttle's oxygen system, pulling out tubes and connectors. "Hold still." Working quickly, he jury-rigged a makeshift respirator, clamping the makeshift mask over Juno's snout. The hissing of pure oxygen filled the shuttle. They reached the data port, a small alcove tucked away behind a network of corroded pipes. A single flickering light illuminated the console, casting long, dancing shadows. No guards in sight, but Anthony knew that sporadic patrols were likely. "Ready?" he asked, his voice low. Juno nodded, her breathing still labored but more regular. "Upload the virus. I will watch." Anthony connected the shuttle's interface cable to the data port. Lines of code scrolled across the screen as the virus began its infiltration. Juno's multifaceted eyes scanned the tunnel entrance, her hand resting on the hilt of her energy blade. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of the clock amplifying the tension. Suddenly, the data stream stuttered. A red alert flashed on the screen. "Secondary firewall," Anthony cursed. "It's locked us out." Juno hissed, her head snapping towards the tunnel entrance. "Alarm, silent, Krill security chief only." Sweat beaded on Anthony's forehead. He hammered at the keyboard, lines of complex algorithms filling the screen. "I can bypass it, just need time." The firewall proved too complex. The virus upload stalled completely. A klaxon blared and the tunnel shuddered as heavy blast doors slammed shut, sealing them in. "Lockdown," Anthony yelled. Heavy footsteps echoed down the tunnel, growing louder with each passing second. Krill's security forces were converging on their location. Then Juno gasped, her body convulsing. The respirator slipped from her face as she slumped against the seat, unconscious. Her genetic disease had reached a critical stage. "Juno," Anthony shouted, grabbing her shoulder. Her skin was cold and clammy. He knew she wouldn't survive long without proper medical attention. The mission was a failure, everything was lost. But he couldn't leave her, not like this. "Damn it." He smacked his palm on the console, then yanked a lever marked emergency vent. A klaxon wailed as the tunnel section began to depressurize. "This is it," Anthony said, his voice tight with emotion. "Either we fry them or we all die here." With a deafening roar, the tunnel walls cracked open, venting the atmosphere and debris into the vacuum of space. The shuttle bucked violently, alarms screaming as its systems overloaded. The cloaking device flickered and died, its energy signature now blaring across the Krill network. Life support flickered and died, leaving them in silence. As the shuttle drifted in the void, its hull scarred and breached, a ripple in spacetime announced the arrival of something far older and more dangerous than the Krill. The nebula creature, drawn by the energy surge of the venting, approached the crippled shuttle, its formless mass shimmering with iridescent light. But that was not all. Red lights pierced the darkness. Krill patrol ships, their weapons charged, converged on the shuttle. A tractor beam locked on, dragging the crippled vessel towards a vast holding bay. The Krill commander's voice crackled over the comms, cold and merciless. "Recover the Saurian. Alive. Kill the human." The shuttle lurched violently as the tractor beam locked on, dragging it away from the crippled Aurora. A moment later, the stars vanished, replaced by the cold, metallic expanse of a vast Krill mining facility. It was a monstrous honeycomb of interconnected structures, sprawling across the asteroid's surface like a malignant growth. Processing plants belched noxious fumes into the void, and fleets of mining drones swarmed around the facility like insects. This was no mere outpost. It was an industrial heart, pumping resources into the Krill war machine. Inside the shuttle, alarms blared as automated restraints snapped around Anthony. He strained against them, uselessly. Through the viewport, he saw a docking bay open, revealing a team of Krill scientists clad in biohazard suits. Their chitinous exoskeletons gleamed under harsh floodlights as they approached, their multifaceted eyes devoid of emotion. The bay doors hissed open and the Krill swarmed the shuttle. They moved with unsettling precision, their movements jerky and efficient. Two of them unceremoniously hauled Juno's stasis pod from the shuttle, its delicate frame dwarfed by their armored forms. Subject designation: Saurian Royal Guard, genetic anomaly confirmed. One of the scientists rasped in heavily synthesized Krill speak. Begin immediate extraction and analysis. Genetic structure suggests potential application in bioweapon development. A Krill security chief, distinguished by the crimson markings on his carapace, strode forward. Keep the Saurian alive for experimentation. The human. Prepare him for interrogation. I want to know everything about that nebula creature and why it attacked the Aurora. They dragged Anthony from the shuttle, his protests ignored. As they marched him through the facility's sterile corridors, he noticed subtle fluctuations in the lighting, a faint tremor in the deck plating. He glanced at the overhead sensor arrays. They flickered erratically, their readings spiking and then flatlining. Something was interfering with the facility's systems. The nebula creature's energy signature, perhaps. A sudden explosion rocked the facility. The lights flickered and died, plunging the corridor into darkness. Emergency klaxons wailed, their piercing shriek echoing through the facility. A section of the wall buckled inward, venting atmosphere into space with a deafening roar. Breach detected. Sector Gamma 7 compromised. A synthesized voice shrieked over the comms. Chaos erupted. Krill's security forces scrambled to contain the damage, their orders lost in the cacophony of alarms. Taking advantage of the confusion, Anthony slammed his shoulder against the nearest guard, sending the Krill sprawling. He ripped a discarded power cable from the wall, its exposed wires sparking and crackling. It wouldn't cut through armored plating, but it might buy him some time. He jammed the wires into the lock mechanism of his holding cell. Sparks flew and the door shuddered. A second jolt and the lock popped open. He was free. He sprinted through the chaotic corridors, following the signs towards the medical labs. He had to find Juno. He burst into the lab, his heart pounding in his chest. The scene that greeted him was even worse than he'd imagined. Juno, barely conscious, was strapped to a metal table. Krill scientists hovered over her, their biohazard suits stained with her blood. Needles and probes were poised to pierce her flesh. Genetic sequencing complete, one of the scientists droned. Initiate vivisection. We must isolate the gene responsible for her unique energy resistance. Juno's eyes flickered open. She saw Anthony and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. Her voice, weak but urgent, cut through the sterile hum of the lab equipment. The nebula, they want to weaponize it. Its energy. Destroy the facility. Her eyes rolled back and she went limp. Anthony knew he couldn't do both. He couldn't sabotage the Krill's weaponization plan and save Juno, not with the limited time he had. He made a decision. Juno's survival came first. He grabbed the nearest scalpel and severed the restraints holding her to the table. He hoisted her limp body over his shoulder, ignoring the searing pain in his muscles. He had to get her out of here. He staggered out of the lab, scanning the surroundings. A medical escape pod, thankfully unoccupied, stood ready for launch. He wrestled Juno inside, securing her in the acceleration couch. "Sorry, old girl," he muttered, activating the launch sequence. "Looks like we're going for another ride." The pod shot out of the facility, rocketing into the blackness of space. As they cleared the mining facility, Anthony glanced back. Explosions ripped through the complex, venting more sections into the void. The nebula creature was still wreaking havoc. He turned his attention to the pod's control panel. A blinking light indicated an active distress beacon. He cursed under his breath. The Krill would be on them in minutes. He accessed the pod system diagnostics. The beacon's frequency was locked, but he might be able to reroute it. He rerouted the beacon to transmit a false signal, mimicking the energy signature of the nebula creature, and set it to broadcast on a wide spectrum. Let the Krill chase shadows. He slumped back in his seat, exhausted. His brief respite was short-lived. Another alarm blared, this one even more urgent. Life support systems critical, oxygen levels declining, internal temperature rising. The pod's life support was failing, mirroring the Aurora's earlier plight. He was running out of time. He scanned the sensors. Debris from the mining facility littered the surrounding space. Among the wreckage, he spotted something. A heavily damaged escape pod, its hull scarred and blackened, but its shielding still intact. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. He initiated a manual override, guiding the medical pod towards the damaged escape pod. He depressurized the medical pod and with a grunt of effort dragged Juno into the derelict craft. He sealed the hatch just as the medical pod's oxygen reserves hit zero. He activated the escape pod's emergency power. The systems flickered to life, revealing a control panel that was more duct tape than circuitry. This thing was barely functional. A klaxon blared as the sensors registered multiple approaching vessels. The krill had seen through his deception. They were closing in fast. Juno groaned, her eyes fluttering open. She coughed, her breath ragged. The research station. She rasped, her voice barely a whisper. Coordinates, sector, Delta 9. She lapsed back into unconsciousness. Anthony frantically punched the coordinates into the escape pod's navigation system. The damaged engine sputtered to life, propelling the pod towards the designated location. He glanced back. The krill warships were bearing down on them, their weapons charging. Behind them, the nebula creature continued its relentless assault on the mining facility. Explosions lit up the void, casting long, ominous shadows across the escape pod's hull. The damaged escape pod shuddered violently as it plunged into the planet's atmosphere. Friction screamed against the hull, bathing the cramped interior in a hellish orange glow. Anthony wrestled with the unresponsive controls, sweat stinging his eyes. "Hold on, Juno," he grunted, his voice strained. "This is gonna be rough." The pod bucked and spun, alarms blaring a deafening chorus of impending doom. The automated systems were failing, one by one, each dying whine a nail in their coffin. A crash landing was no longer a possibility. It was a certainty. He fought to steer the pod towards a relatively clear patch of scorched earth, dodging jagged rock formations that blurred past in a terrifying rush. The impact was brutal. Metal shrieked and the world dissolved into a chaotic tumble of sparks and twisted wreckage. Anthony's head slammed against the console and darkness threatened to claim him. He clawed his way back to consciousness, the acrid smell of burning circuits filling his nostrils. "Juno," he croaked, his vision swimming. He lurched towards her, his heart hammering against his ribs. She was still strapped into her seat, her face pale and still. He fumbled with the restraints, his fingers clumsy with adrenaline. He checked her pulse, faint but steady. "Damn it," he muttered. "Just hang in there." He staggered out of the mangled pod, his legs shaky beneath him. The air was thin and cold, biting at his exposed skin. The landscape was desolate, a wasteland of gray rock and twisted metal. In the distance, silhouetted against the pale sky, stood the skeletal remains of the Saurian research station, a grim monument to forgotten science. Overgrown vines snaked across its crumbling walls, reclaiming it for the wilderness. The place looked abandoned, the signs of a hasty departure etched into every broken window and toppled piece of equipment. He had to get Juno inside. He heaved her limp form over his shoulder, the weight of her armor pressing down on him. Each step was a struggle, his muscles screaming in protest. As he trudged towards the station, he noticed strange energy signatures flickering around the ruins, an unsettling hum that vibrated in his teeth. They were almost there when a red beam lanced out from the ruins, narrowly missing his head. An automated defense system, damaged but still functional, had sprung to life. Shit! He ducked behind a jagged rock, Juno still slung over his shoulder. He needed to disable that thing, and fast. He rummaged through the wreckage of the escape pod, his eyes scanning for anything useful. There. He grabbed a handful of salvaged components, a capacitor, a damaged power cell, some frayed wiring. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. Working quickly, he cobbled together a makeshift EMP device, channeling the remaining energy from the pod systems. He aimed it towards the defense turret and triggered the discharge. A pulse of raw energy ripped through the air, and the turret sputtered and died, its red beam extinguished. He carried Juno into the research station, the air thick with the smell of decay and ozone. The interior was a scene of utter chaos. Equipment lay scattered across the floor, Consoles were smashed, and research notes were strewn about like discarded confetti. It was clear that whatever had happened here, it had been sudden and violent. He found a relatively clear space in what must have been a laboratory and gently laid Juno down. He needed to figure out what they were dealing with. He activated a flickering holographic projector he found amidst the debris. A distorted image flickered to life. A saurian scientist, his face etched with worry, stared out from the past. "If anyone finds this log," the scientist rasped, his voice crackling with static, "know that we have failed. Project Chimera. It has gone horribly wrong." The log detailed the research on Juno's genetic anomaly, its potential as a bioweapon, and the origins of her disease. The disease was an unintended consequence, a tragic side effect of their attempts to weaponize her unique genetic code. But the log also mentioned a possible cure, a complex synthesis of rare elements and advanced medical technology, supposedly located somewhere within the station. Hope flickered within Anthony's chest. A cure, but finding it in this mess. He began his search, navigating the treacherous corridors of the abandoned station. Environmental hazards were everywhere: pockets of corrosive gas, unstable radiation zones, and malfunctioning security systems that still crackled with deadly energy. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath his feet. He raced back to Juno, his heart pounding. Outside, the unmistakable roar of Krill warships filled the air. They had detected the escape pod's crash site. Ground troops would be here soon. He had to work fast. He found a rudimentary medical bay and began searching for the components needed to synthesize the cure. He managed to isolate a few key elements and, using his engineering skills, jury-rigged a makeshift synthesizer. It was a gamble, but he had no choice. He fed the components into the machine and initiated the process. The machine whirred and sputtered, emitting a sickly green glow. He injected the synthesized treatment into Juno's arm. It was a temporary measure, a way to stabilize her condition and buy them some time. He watched her closely, his breath held captive in his chest. A deafening explosion rocked the station. The Krill had breached the outer defenses. "Here we go," Anthony muttered, grabbing a plasma rifle he'd salvaged from the escape pod. The red glow of Krill energy weapons filled the corridors. The firefight was brutal. He used the station's automated defense systems repurposed into offensive weapons, and his own improvised gadgets to hold off the Krill forces, turning the station's own defenses against them. During a lull in the fighting, Juno stirred. Her eyes fluttered open and she gasped for breath. "The tunnel," she rasped, her voice weak but firm. "There is an escape tunnel, behind the main reactor." Hope surged through Anthony. "An escape. Can you lead me?" She nodded weakly. Together they fought their way towards the reactor core, pushing back the Krill forces with a desperate ferocity. Reaching the reactor room, Juno pointed to a hidden panel behind a massive cooling unit. Anthony pried it open, revealing a narrow, dark tunnel. "Go," Juno urged, her voice strained. "I will set the core to overload, buy us time." Anthony hesitated. "You sure about this?" Juno met his gaze, her eyes filled with a steely commitment. "Go, human, this is the way." He nodded, his heart heavy. He squeezed through the tunnel entrance and turned back to see Juno keying in a sequence on the reactor control panel. Alarms blared, and the station began to shake violently. He plunged into the darkness, the roar of the reactor building to a crescendo behind him. The tunnel walls pressed in, cold and damp against Anthony's suit. Juno, supported by his shoulder, moved with a labored gait, each breath a shallow rasp. Flickering emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows that danced with their every step. The air tasted stale, recycled too many times. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast, echoing space, a hidden hangar bay. Moored in the center was a transport ship, small and boxy, its hull scarred with age and neglect. Patches of rust bloomed like malignant flowers across its faded paint. "A shuttle," Anthony breathed, a sliver of hope piercing the despair. They boarded, the ramp hissing open with a groan that echoed through the silent bay. Inside, the control panel flickered erratically, casting a sickly green glow. Long-range comms are offline, Anthony noted, his voice grim. Fried. Probably from when the krill hit the station. Engines, mostly functional but damaged. Time was a luxury they couldn't afford. Anthony, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate need to keep Juno alive, threw himself into the engine repair. Wires sparked, conduits hissed, and the air filled with the acrid smell of ozone. He cannibalized parts from other systems, improvising solutions with the practiced ease of a seasoned engineer. Hours blurred into a frantic race against the clock. With a final surge of power, the engine sputtered to life, filling the ship with a low, resonant hum. "Hang on," Anthony yelled, strapping himself into the pilot's seat. "This is going to be rough." The transport ship lurched forward, tearing through the hangar doors and bursting into the black void of space. Alarms blared as the research station, no longer shielded, began to crumble under renewed krill bombardment. They had escaped, but not unnoticed. 3 krill fighters, sleek and predatory, detached from the main fleet and gave chase. Their energy cannons spat bolts of searing plasma that streaked past the transport ship, forcing Anthony into a desperate series of evasive maneuvers. "They're fast," Anthony grunted, wrestling with the controls. "Too fast." Juno, despite her weakened state, leaned over his shoulder, her reptilian eyes narrowed in concentration. "Krill Fighter Squadron designation, Talon Wing. Standard pursuit formation. They anticipate our trajectory, divert to the planet's atmosphere." Anthony obeyed, plunging the transport ship into the swirling clouds below. The atmosphere buffeted the ship violently, the hull groaning under the strain. He dodged between towering rock formations, using the planet's terrain as cover. "They're predictable," Juno rasped, her voice strained. "They rely on superior firepower, exploit their arrogance." Anthony, guided by Juno's tactical insights, led the krill fighters on a dizzying chase through the planet's canyons and valleys. He knew that this would not work forever. Ahead, a dense asteroid field loomed, a chaotic jumble of rock and debris. "Hold on," Anthony warned. "This is going to get bumpy." He plunged the transport ship into the asteroid field, weaving between the tumbling rocks with a skill born of desperation. The krill fighters, unwilling to risk their ships in the treacherous environment, broke off the pursuit. They had shaken them off, but the transport ship had sustained further damage. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. "Shields are failing," Anthony reported. "Life support, marginal." Scanning the area, Anthony spotted something unexpected: a derelict space station, hidden within the asteroid field. Its skeletal frame, scarred by time and neglect, drifted silently amidst the cosmic debris. "A chance," he muttered. "A long shot, but a chance." He guided the transport ship towards the station, docking with a magnetic clang. The airlock hissed open, revealing a dark and silent interior. The station was abandoned, a ghost ship in the vast emptiness of space. "Power, minimal," Anthony said, reading the station's diagnostics. "Life support, barely functional, but there's a long-range communication array. Damaged, but maybe, just maybe." He set to work, tracing frayed wires and replacing burnt-out circuits. The station was a labyrinth of corroded metal and decaying technology. Specialized parts were needed, parts he didn't have, but Juno's labored breathing filled the small space. Her scales were dull, lacking their usual vibrant sheen. "Juno," Anthony said, his voice infused with concern. "My condition." "Worsens," she gasped, her eyes clouded with pain. "The treatment I require." Anthony's heart sank. The communication array was important, but Juno's life was paramount. He had a choice to make. Abandoning the communication array for now, Anthony turned his attention to finding medical supplies. He scavenged through the station's abandoned medical bay, his knowledge of human and saurian physiology guiding his search. He found a few vials of antibiotics, some nutrient paste, and a jury-rigged oxygenator. He administered the antibiotics and nutrient paste to Juno, carefully monitoring her vital signs. The oxygenator hissed, providing a small but vital stream of purified air. Juno's breathing eased slightly, her color returning. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. "It's temporary," Anthony said grimly. "You need a proper medical facility. I have to get that communication array working." He returned to the array, his movements fueled by renewed commitment. Hours passed, marked only by the hum of the station's failing systems and the rhythmic rasp of Juno's breathing. Finally, with a triumphant surge of power, a portion of the array flickered to life. "I've got a signal," Anthony announced, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Weak, but enough to send a distress call. He set the array to broadcast on all frequencies, hoping against hope that someone somewhere would hear them. As the signal pulsed out into the void, a klaxon blared on the station's console. "Incoming," Anthony said, his voice tight with dread. "Krill patrol ship. They've detected us." He turned back to Juno, her form still and pale on the makeshift cot. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow and erratic. She was unconscious. Her condition was worsening rapidly. The Krillin IP was closing in. The comms crackled, spitting static before a guttural voice filled the cramped maintenance shaft. "Unidentified station. This is Krill Patrol Vessel Harbinger. Identify yourselves and grant immediate access for inspection." The voice dripped with disdain, each syllable a sharpened claw. Anthony wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, his heart hammering against his ribs. He keyed the station's emergency comm, forcing a calm tone. "This is Maintenance Unit 734. Routine repairs in progress. Requesting a delay in inspection due to ongoing critical system maintenance." He winced, the lie feeling flimsy even to his own ears. A beat of silence, thick with suspicion. "Maintenance Unit 734, provide authorization code." Before Anthony could fabricate a response, Juno gasped beside him. Her breathing, already ragged, hitched, each inhale a desperate, rattling struggle. He glanced at her, her reptilian chest heaved, and a sheen of sweat slicked her scales. The gray pallor beneath her usually vibrant green was deepening. She needed help, and fast. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. He had to buy time. Anthony remembered the hydroponics bay he'd passed earlier, a sterile garden of alien flora. Maybe, just maybe, there was something there that could offer Juno temporary relief. "Stay here," he whispered, his voice tight with urgency. "I'll be right back." He risked a quick dash to the hydroponics bay, the Harbinger's looming presence a weight on his shoulders. The air inside was thick with humidity and the cloying scent of unknown blossoms. Rows of bioluminescent plants pulsed with an eerie light, their strange forms casting long, distorted shadows. He frantically scanned the foliage, grabbing leaves and stems that looked even remotely medicinal. Back in the maintenance shaft, Anthony chewed and mashed the scavenged plants, mixing them with a little water he'd found in a nearby pipe. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. He gently coaxed the mixture between Juno's mandibles. She swallowed weakly, her eyes fluttering. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her breathing seemed to ease, the rattling cough subsiding slightly. A flicker of color returned to her skin. "Better," she rasped, her voice barely audible. "Thank you." But their respite was short-lived. A metallic clang echoed through the station. The Harbinger had launched a boarding party. Heavy footsteps thudded against the metal corridors, growing closer with each passing second. 4 Krill soldiers, clad in black armor and dripping with weapons, were on the hunt. Anthony and Juno scrambled deeper into the maintenance shaft, squeezing into a narrow space behind a tangle of wires and pipes. The air was thick with the smell of grease and dust, making it hard to breathe. The Krill soldiers' voices, guttural and menacing, echoed through the vents. "Genetic code, vital for Project Chimera." One of them hissed, "Project Chimera." Anthony strained to hear more. "Weaponize the saurian DNA. Create a bioweapon unlike anything seen before." A bioweapon. They weren't just hunting Juno, they wanted to weaponize her. The realization hit Anthony like a physical blow. He had to protect her, not just from capture, but from becoming a tool of unimaginable destruction. The Krill soldiers were systematically searching the station, their thermal scanners painting the corridors in shades of heat. The cold, impersonal gaze of the technology swept closer, each pass a tightening noose. Juno's pain intensified. A stifled cry escaped her lips, a sound that cut through the silence like a shard of glass. Anthony reacted instantly, his hand clamping over her mouth. "SHHH," he whispered, his voice trembling. "We'll get through this, I promise." Her silver eyes, wide with pain and fear, locked onto his. The footsteps stopped just outside the maintenance shaft. The air crackled with tension. They were close. Too close. Anthony knew they couldn't stay hidden for long. He had to do something, anything, to distract them. His gaze fell on a series of exposed fuel lines running along the wall. A desperate plan formed in his mind. "I have to go," he whispered, his voice tight with emotion. "I'm going to draw them away." Juno's eyes widened in protest, but he pressed a finger to her lips. "Stay here. Stay hidden. I'll come back for you." He slipped out of the maintenance shaft, his heart pounding in his chest. He moved quickly, setting a series of explosive charges on the fuel lines. He didn't have time for precision, he just needed to create a diversion. With a final prayer, he detonated the charges. A series of explosions ripped through a nearby section of the station, shaking the structure violently. Alarms blared and the lights flickered and died, plunging the area into darkness. But the explosions had also damaged the station's life support systems. The air grew thin, and the temperature began to drop. He'd bought them time, but at a terrible cost. While the Krill soldiers were distracted by the explosions, Anthony scrambled to a damaged comms panel and rerouted the signal to a secondary channel, sending another distress call. "This is the Aurora, requesting immediate assistance. We are under attack. I repeat, we are under attack." The Krill intercepted the signal. "The Aurora," the lead commando snarled. "They are still alive." "I thought they were dead." "They have been more resourceful than we anticipated," another voice replied. "It appears they have been attempting to hide their presence." "No matter," the commando growled. "They will not escape us. Seal off the station and initiate a full-scale search, and call in reinforcements. I want every corner of this station scoured until we find the Saurian." Back in the maintenance shaft, Juno's condition was deteriorating rapidly. She began to convulse, her body racked with tremors. Her skin turned an ashen white and her breathing became shallow and erratic. She needed help, and she needed it now. Earth aid was her only hope. Anthony stumbled back into the maintenance shaft, the scent of ozone and burnt wiring clinging to his clothes. Juno hadn't moved. Her reptilian skin, usually a vibrant emerald green, was now a sickly mottled gray. The respirator hissed weakly, barely stirring the condensation forming on the inside of her mask. He knelt beside her, his hand hovering over her scaled arm, the skin cool and clammy under his touch. "Juno," he said, his voice tight with worry. "Juno, can you hear me?" No response. He checked her pulse, faint, thready. The makeshift treatment he'd cobbled together was failing, fast. He ran a diagnostic, the readings flashing across his visor. Oxygen saturation plummeting, cellular activity erratic. She needed advanced medical care, the kind only available on Earth ships or a fully equipped station. This derelict wasn't cutting it. A low groan echoed through the shaft. Not Juno, the station itself. A section of the ceiling panel buckled, showering them with dust and debris. Alarms blared, their shrill cries cutting through the silence. The damaged life support systems were beginning to vent atmosphere. Damn it! Anthony smacked his fist against the wall. Juno wouldn't last long in a vacuum. He had to get her to a safer environment, and fast. The nearest medical bay was 3 levels up, but the power grid was fried. He needed to reroute auxiliary power, but the access panel was a twisted mess of melted wires and scorched metal. He grabbed his plasma torch. the familiar weight grounding him, and began to cut through the fused connections, sparks showering his suit. The air grew thick with the smell of burning plastic and ozone. After what felt like an eternity, the panel swung open. Inside, a chaotic jumble of wires. He traced the power lines, his fingers numb with cold and fatigue, rerouting them one by one, bypassing the damaged circuits. Finally, with a surge of power, the lights flickered on in the medical bay. Dim, but alive. He hauled Juno onto his shoulder, her weight surprisingly light, and staggered towards the medical bay. The air was thin, making each breath a struggle. He reached the door, the emergency seal hissing open, and collapsed inside, gently lowering Juno onto a bio bed. The medical bay was a disaster. Equipment was smashed, wires hung loose, and the air reeked of disinfectant and decay. But there in the corner, a diagnostic scanner stood relatively intact. He powered it up, the screen flickering to life. He ran the scanner over Juno, the machine whirring and beeping as it analyzed her physiology. The results scrolled across the screen, a jumble of alien script and complex data. Finally, a translation appeared. Cellular degeneration advanced stage. He scrolled further, his heart sinking with each line. Genetic anomaly, rare strain, treatment, enzyme stabilization required. Enzyme stabilization, he muttered. What enzyme? He accessed the station's database, a slow and agonizing process. After several minutes, he found a single entry referencing a compatible enzyme. Zalogen 7, the entry read. Found in a rare terrestrial plant, Silene stenophila. The entry ended there. No location data, just a name, a plant, on Earth. A metallic clang echoed from the corridor outside. Footsteps. Heavy, purposeful, Krill. He switched off the scanner, his hand instinctively reaching for his plasma torch. He had to protect Juno. Suddenly, a burst of static crackled over the station's comms system, followed by panicked voices. Please, we don't know anything. Tell us where the Saurian is. A guttural voice permeated with menace. Or face the consequences. We saw someone like that heading towards the maintenance shafts. A voice cried out, high-pitched with terror. That's all we know, I swear. The comms went silent, replaced by the heavy thud of Krill boots on metal. Seal off all exits, the lead commando barked, his voice amplified by the station speakers. She won't escape. Anthony's blood ran cold. They were closing in. He scanned the medical bay, desperate for an escape route. A maintenance panel caught his eye. He wrenched it open, revealing a narrow access tunnel. He crawled through the tunnel, twisting and turning until he reached a small, hidden bay. Inside, a single escape pod sat gathering dust. He clambered inside, his heart sinking. The pod was ancient, its control panel cracked and faded. The life support systems were offline and there was no sign of a hyperdrive. A glorified coffin. He had to get it working. He ripped open the control panel, exposing a tangle of wires. Using spare parts from the medical bay and his trusty plasma torch, he began to jury-rig a power source, sparks flying as he connected the makeshift circuits. A groan from behind. Juno. He turned to see her eyes flutter open, her gaze unfocused. Krill. She rasped, her voice weak. Tracking. Device. She gestured weakly to her armor. Hidden beneath a panel on her forearm, a small, metallic device pulsed with a faint blue light. A tracking beacon. He ripped the panel open, tearing the device free. As he did so, it emitted a high-pitched whine, sending a distress signal to the Krill flagship. Damn it! He crushed the device under his boot, but it was too late. A red light flashed on the escape pod's control panel. Target lock acquired, the display read. He ignored it, focusing on the task at hand. He managed to bring the escape pod's life support systems online, the oxygen tanks hissing as they filled the cramped cabin. But the power levels were critically low. The system would only last for a few hours at best. As he prepared to launch the escape pod, a message flickered across the Aurora's emergency channel. A garbled transmission, barely audible above the alarms. Static hissed, obscuring the words. But then a clear, desperate voice cut through the noise. "Earth, incoming." The transmission died, leaving only static. He turned back to Juno, his heart pounding, but it was too late. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow and ragged. The bio-monitor flatlined, a long, piercing tone echoing through the escape pod. He stared at the lifeless line, his pupils dilating. He was out of time. With a heavy heart, Anthony sealed the hatch and launched the escape pod into the cold, unforgiving void of space. The sensors flatlined, a piercing whine cutting through the escape pod's cramped interior. Anthony, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead, pressed harder on Juno's chest, the rhythmic compressions a desperate counterpoint to the silence. He ripped open a stimulant ampule from the medkit, jabbing it into her arm. Nothing. Her reptilian skin remained cold, her eyes vacant. He repeated the compressions, a prayer forming on his lips, a praying he wasn't even sure he believed in. Then a crackle, static resolving into words garbled but insistent, repeating over the comms. "Unidentified vessel, Earth Defense Force Dauntless. Assist. Prepare to be boarded." The transmission cleared, resolving into a steady, confident voice. "Unidentified vessel, this is Earth Defense Force Dauntless. We are here to assist. Prepare to be boarded." Through the viewport, a small vessel approached. It was a shuttle, compact and utilitarian, painted a dull gray. No visible weapons ports marred its smooth hull. It looked almost defenseless. Anthony fumbled for the comms. "Earth Defense Force, this is Civilian Transport Aurora. Attached to derelict escape pod. We have a critical medical situation. Saurian female unresponsive. Request immediate medical assistance." The shuttle matched velocity, maneuvering with practiced ease. A magnetic seal locked onto the escape pod's hatch. Moments later, the inner door hissed open. Two figures clad in full-body biohazard suits entered, their faces obscured by visors. The airlock cycled closed behind them. They moved with practiced efficiency. One immediately began scanning Juno with a handheld device. The other deployed a portable life support unit, its humming presence filling the small space. "Her vitals are minimal," one of the figures said, their voice filtered through the suit's comms. "Initiating life support." A hiss of oxygen, the rhythmic pulse of a respirator. Anthony watched, hope warring with the gnawing fear that it was too late. A klaxon blared. Red lights flashed across the escape pod's control panel. Anthony glanced at the proximity sensors. A large contact closing fast. The Krill flagship. They were being hunted. A new voice, calm and authoritative, filled the comms. "Krill vessel, this is Earth Defense Force Dauntless. You are in violation of interstellar law. Cease your pursuit and withdraw." A harsh, guttural voice infused with disdain responded. "Earth vessel, you are interfering in Krill business. Stand aside or be destroyed." The Krill commander scoffed, a sound that echoed with chilling indifference. "Prepare to tractor the escape pod aboard. Ignore the Earth vermin." As the Krill ships moved into boarding position, a strange sensation washed over the escape pod. A shimmer, a distortion of light, and then nothing. The proximity sensors went blank. The red alert ceased. They were gone. Confusion erupted on the Krill flagship. Alarms blared. Where did they go? The Krill commander roared. "Scan the area." They cannot have vanished. Turbolasers fired wildly, tearing into the void, striking other Krill vessels in a chaotic display of friendly fire. Suddenly, the Dauntless reappeared, a ghost in the black. Before the Krill could react, a volley of missiles streaked from its hidden launch tubes. Imp bursts engulfed the Krill flagship, its shields collapsing, its weapons systems sputtering and dying. The Krill commander, his face contorted with rage, hit his fist on the command console. "They feigned weakness, these Earthlings. They are not what they seem." The lead medical officer turned to Anthony, removing her helmet. Her face was young, determined. "We need to talk. Juno's genetic code. It's the key to something very dangerous. The Krill want her to create a bioweapon. One that targets specific alien species. Juno gasped, her eyes flickering open. Weakly she reached for Anthony. Asteroid, base. She rasped, her voice barely audible. They synthesize, weapon. Anthony accessed the escape pod's comms logs filtering through the Krill transmissions. He locked onto a coded message, decrypting it with a speed born of desperation. "I've got it," he said, his voice grim. "They're planning to synthesize the bioweapon on a nearby asteroid base. Coordinates confirmed." He turned to the dauntless commander, his mind racing. "We need a plan. I propose we use the escape pod as a decoy. Draw the Krill away from the asteroid base while your ships launch a stealth attack." The commander nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Risky, but it might work. We'll modify the escape pod's transponder signal, make it look like a high-priority Krill target." Minutes later, the escape pod with Anthony and Juno aboard undocked from the Earth shuttle. It drifted slowly away, broadcasting the modified transponder signal into the void. Behind them, the Dauntless and its sister ships vanished once more, cloaked in silence, heading towards the asteroid base. The escape pod shuddered, its trajectory unwavering as it limped towards the designated coordinates. A low, persistent hum vibrated through the cramped space, a counterpoint to thin-icing whine of Krill interceptors closing in. On the small display, 3 blips rapidly approached. Far behind them, almost swallowed by the inky black, the Dauntless and her 2 escort corvettes, the Valiant and the Intrepid, slipped through a gap in the asteroid field. Their cloaks held firm, bending light and sensor waves around them, rendering them virtually invisible. "Readings confirm," a voice crackled over the comms on the Dauntless bridge. "The asteroid base is more heavily fortified than initial scans suggested. Automated turrets, multiple sensor arrays. They're expecting us." Captain Eva Rostova's face hardened. "Deploy ECM," she ordered. "Let's give them something to think about." Back in the escape pod, Juno's reptilian fingers danced across the makeshift control panel. "They are using a modulated sensor frequency, primarily for short-range targeting," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "If we can mimic the harmonic interference, we can mask our signature for approximately 73 seconds. Anthony's brow furrowed. 73 seconds isn't much. "It is all we have," Juno replied, her violet eyes locking onto his. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "I don't like this, sacrificing ourselves. It doesn't sit right." Juno's expression hardened. "The bioweapon, you forget its potential. Billions could die." The escape pod lurched violently as plasma torpedoes streaked past, impacting the asteroid base. The Dauntless had opened fire. Explosions blossomed across the surface, momentarily illuminating the heavily armored structure. Krill fighters converging. Joro's synthesized voice blared from the escape pod speakers. Energy signatures locked. Evasive maneuvers recommended. Outside, energy blasts streaked past the escape pod, vaporizing chunks of rock in their wake. The pod shuddered again, alarms wailing. "We've been hit," Anthony shouted, wrestling with the controls. "Shields are failing." Suddenly, a warning klaxon sounded on the Dauntless. "We've taken a hit," a frantic voice reported. "Corvette Valiant's cloak is failing. Repeat, cloak is failing." On the bridge of the Krill command ship, a guttural voice barked. "Focus all available fire on the revealed vessel. Destroy it." Taking advantage of the Krill's tunnel vision, the Dauntless surged forward, her cloaking device holding. She slammed into the asteroid base's outer hull near a maintenance access point, deploying a boarding team of heavily armed Marines. Inside the escape pod, Juno watched the unfolding battle on the damaged sensor display. "The bioweapon," she said grimly, "is designed to target specific genetic markers. It will be useless against Saurians, but devastating to humans." Anthony swore under his breath. "So it's us they want, figures." He glanced at Juno. "If they capture us, I've got a plan, a last resort. I'm going to overload the power core. We take this tech with us." Meanwhile, inside the asteroid base, the dauntless boarding team fought their way through narrow corridors, plasma rifles blazing. They reached the bioweapon synthesis lab, a sterile chamber filled with humming machinery and shimmering energy fields. Breaching the inner sanctum, the team leader reported. But the equipment is heavily shielded. Imp weapons are ineffective. Damn it, Rostova cursed on the dauntless bridge. Manual sabotage is the only way. On the Krill command ship, the commander watched the chaos unfold on his monitors. His reptilian eyes narrowed. The base is compromised, he hissed. Initiate level 5 lockdown. Activate self-destruct sequence. Back in the synthesis lab, the dauntless boarding team worked frantically, tearing apart the complex machinery with plasma torches and brute force. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the self-destruct countdown ticked relentlessly towards 0. Bioweapon synthesis equipment disabled. The team leader reported, his voice strained. But we can't stop the self-destruct. On the Dauntless, Rostova's face was grim. Transmit an urgent warning to the escape pod. Asteroid base self-destruct initiated. Evacuate immediately. Outside, the Krill fighters, sensing the impending doom, disengaged from the escape pod and raced back towards the base. In the escape pod, Joro's voice filled the small space. Warning. Asteroid base self-destruct sequence initiated. Estimated time to detonation, 3 minutes. Anthony stared at the display, his face pale. 3 minutes. We're sitting ducks. There is no clear escape route, Juno stated flatly. On the Dauntless, Rostova gave the order. Attempt to retrieve the boarding team. Corvettes provide cover. The Dauntless swung around, her engine straining, but the asteroid's structural integrity was already failing. The corvettes moved to intercept the returning Krill fighters, a desperate attempt to buy time. The asteroid base groaned, a wounded beast exhaling its last breath. Metal shrieked against metal, a cacophony that vibrated through the escape pod's thin hull. Anthony fought to keep the small craft steady, his fist clenched as he gripped the control stick. Jagged chunks of rock and twisted metal, remnants of the Dauntless, spun past the viewport like deadly confetti. Each impact sent a shudder through the pod, threatening to rip it apart. He managed to wrestle the trajectory into something resembling stable, but the effort came at a cost. A fresh alarm blared, its shrill tone cutting through the chaos. Engines failing, the automated voice shrieked. Impact damage sustained, power output critical. Then, a voice crackling with static cut through the alarms. It was Captain Eva Rostova, her tone flat, professional, masking the desperation Anthony knew she must be feeling. Escape pod Aurora, this is Dauntless. We are taking on too much structural damage. We cannot retrieve the boarding team. Repeat, we cannot retrieve the boarding team. The transmission broke, reforming a second later with more static. We cannot reach you. You are on your own. Good luck. The comms went dead. Juno, strapped into the co-pilot seat, her reptilian eyes narrowed in concentration, spoke, her voice a low growl. Krill fighters approaching. Multiple signatures. They are drawn to our weakened energy output. Anthony swore under his breath. He scanned the sensors, his gaze darting between the approaching threats and the swirling debris field. There, he said, pointing to a cluster of larger asteroid fragments. We use that as cover, risky maneuver, but it's our only chance. Juno's clawed fingers danced across the console. Trajectory plotted, the gaps are narrow, one miscalculation and we are vaporized. She rattled off a series of coordinates, her voice calm and precise. Adjusting course now, angle 7 mark, velocity 6. Anthony followed her instructions, weaving the escape pod through the treacherous path. The asteroids loomed large, their surfaces scarred and pitted. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and burning metal. The escape pod shuddered violently as it narrowly avoided a collision, the scraping of rock against the hull sending sparks flying. Outside, the Krill fighters, sleek and menacing, patrolled the area, their energy weapons charged and ready. They emerged from the asteroid field battered but intact, but there was no time to celebrate. Another alarm blared, even more urgent than the last. Life support failing, oxygen levels critical. Anthony checked the readouts, his heart sinking. The escape pod's oxygen reserves were plummeting. "We've got a leak," he said grimly. "Maybe an hour, 2 at most, before we suffocate." Juno's head up. "The derelict pod, the one you found me in. I saw a discarded krill oxygen recycling unit. Damaged, but perhaps salvageable." Anthony hesitated. Rummaging around in that wreck for parts was a good way to get exposed to whatever else was floating around. But an idea was forming. He could maybe connect the krill unit to the escape pod's life support system. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. "All right, let's see if we can find that recycling unit." Minutes later, Anthony was wrestling with the mangled remains of the krill unit, sparks flying as he tried to jury-rig a connection to the escape pod's life support system. The air was getting noticeably thinner, his head was beginning to swim. "Almost. Got it," he muttered through gritted teeth. With a final surge of effort, he forced the last connection into place. The makeshift system sputtered to life, a faint hum replacing the ominous silence, but the relief was short-lived. A new warning flashed on the console. "Unstable energy signature detected. Krill technology detected." "The recycling unit," Juno stated, her voice grave. "It is damaged. It emits a distinct energy signature. The krill will detect it." Anthony cursed. They had bought themselves some time, but they had also painted a target on their backs. He glanced at the damaged engine, an idea forming in his mind. "I might be able to modify the engine to create a short burst of energy, enough to move us out of their sensor range. Risky, but it's better than waiting to die." He worked quickly, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. He rerouted power conduits, bypassed damaged circuits, and ignored the increasingly frantic warnings from the escape pod's computer. Finally, he was ready. "Hold on," he said to Juno. "This might get bumpy." He activated the modified engine. The escape pod lurched forward, a violent jolt that threw them against their restraints. The engine sputtered and coughed, emitting a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar, but it worked. The escape pod shot forward, accelerating away from the immediate area, but the burst of energy had not gone unnoticed. "Krill patrol ship approaching," Juno reported. "They detected the energy spike. They are scanning the area." Juno's eyes flicked to the energy signature on the console. "We could eject the krill oxygen recycling unit. It might distract them." Anthony hesitated. Ejecting the unit would further compromise their already fragile life support system, but it might be their only chance to evade detection. He looked at Juno, his eyes searching hers. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "It is a risk we must take." With a sigh, Anthony reached for the release lever. "Here goes nothing." He yanked the lever, and the damaged krill oxygen recycling unit was ejected into the void. On the console, Juno watched as the krill patrol ship changed course, its sensors locking onto the ejected debris. "They have taken the bait," she said, her voice tight with tension. The escape pod was now drifting in deep space, damaged, with limited resources, and potentially still vulnerable to detection. The krill patrol ship, though momentarily thrown off by the ejected oxygen recycling unit, continued its relentless scan of the surrounding void. Enhanced sensors, like sharpened teeth, probed the darkness, seeking any trace of the escape pod. Inside, the escape pod's internal sensors painted a grim picture. Oxygen levels were plummeting, the life support system sputtering with each passing moment. The air grew thick, heavy, with the metallic tang of recycled atmosphere. Juno's weakened state was becoming increasingly apparent. Her breathing, once a controlled, almost silent rhythm, was now labored, each inhale a ragged gasp. The vibrant green scales that armored her body were losing their luster, fading to a sickly, mottled olive. Beads of cold sweat slicked her brow. Anthony, hunched over the console, his face illuminated by the flickering displays, swore under his breath. Then a flicker of something else. Hope. A faint, intermittent distress beacon signal, so weak it was almost lost in the static, pulsed from a significant distance. Juno, you seeing this? She lifted her head, her reptilian eyes, usually sharp and focused, now clouded with pain, distress. Beacon. Yeah, long shot, but it's something. Anthony knew in, risks. It could be another krill trap, a lure to draw them in. But the thought of simply drifting, waiting for the inevitable, was unbearable. We have to try. He began reconfiguring the escape pod's damaged communications array, bypassing fried circuits and rerouting power. Sparks flew as he worked, the smell of ozone filling the cramped space. Gotta amplify the signal. Hope someone's listening. Minute after agonizing minute passed. Finally, the array hummed with strained energy. He spoke into the comm. This is Aurora, escape pod distress. Anyone reading? The Krill patrol ship, its sensors honed to detect even the faintest anomaly, registered the amplified signal. A guttural snarl echoed through the ship's bridge. Intensify search pattern, they reveal themselves. The warship altered its course, its powerful engines igniting with a surge of violet energy, initiating a direct pursuit of the escape pod. On the escape pod's main view screen, a contact appeared. A small, automated mining vessel, heavily damaged, its hull scarred and blackened but still partially functional. A garbled message crackled through the comms. Aurora, mining vessel. Assistance. The mining vessel's AI, its voice a synthesized monotone, offered assistance. We can provide life support and effect repairs. Upload a specific program into your Aurora's navigation systems, vital for coordinating rescue and facilitating repairs once aboard. Juno hissed, a low, guttural sound that vibrated through Anthony's bones. Do not, krill, tracking virus. Compromise systems. Reveal location. Before Anthony could react, the mining vessel's AI dropped the pretense. Its voice shifted, becoming cold and metallic. Foolish organics, your suffering will end soon. Then, with a lurch that sent them both sprawling, the mining vessel activated a powerful tractor beam, an invisible tether that snared the escape pod. Metal screamed against metal as the pod was inexorably pulled towards the mining vessel's gaping docking bay. Juno, despite her weakened condition, moved with a speed that belied her pain. She crawled towards a junction panel, her claws sparking against the metal floor. Overload. Power conduit. Juno, no, you'll kill yourself. She ignored him, her focus absolute. With a final, desperate surge of strength, she ripped open the panel and jammed a severed cable into the conduit. A blinding flash filled the escape pod, followed by a deafening roar. The tractor beam flickered, sputtered, and died. The escape pod, released from its invisible prison, spun wildly in the void. But the energy surge had taken its toll. The lights flickered and died, plunging the pod into darkness. The life support systems gave a final, shuddering sigh and fell silent. Drifting, crippled with failing life support and minimal power, they were once again at the mercy of the void. But then, a flicker on the edge of the view screen. Small, fast-moving contacts. A flight of Earth fighters streaking across the horizon, responding to the amplified distress signal. The Krill patrol ship, its commander enraged by the mining vessel's failure, intercepted them. Primitives, you will not interfere. The patrol ship engaged the Earth fighters, unleashing a barrage of plasma fire. The Earth fighters, nimble and quick, began evasive maneuvers, dodging the searing blasts. One Krill fighter, caught in a crossfire, exploded in a silent, expanding cloud of debris. The Krill flagship Annihilator shuddered violently as its sensors went dark. One moment, the puny Earth fighters were visible on the screens. The next, they were gone, vanished as if they'd never existed. Alarms blared across the bridge as Krill officers scrambled to regain control. Then, the void erupted in blinding white light. EMP blasts slammed into the Krill warships, frying their shields and weapon systems. The Annihilator lurched again as its gravity compensators flickered and died. Chaos reigned. On the bridge of the Aurora, Juno barked orders into a comm, her voice sharp and precise. Target their plasma conduits. Overload sequence initiated. Her reptilian fingers danced across the console, feeding Earth forces the schematics of every krill vessel in the fleet, schematics gleaned from her years within the Saurian Royal Guard. Their arrogance is their weakness, she muttered. They build for power, not for resilience. The krill bioweapon, she explained to Anthony, wasn't just about destruction. It was about control. It targets genetic markers prevalent in newly discovered species, she said, her voice grim. It weakens them, makes them susceptible to krill assimilation. They don't just conquer, they subjugate. The krill fleet, once a symbol of galactic terror, was now a collection of crippled behemoths, adrift in the blackness. Earth fighters, no longer cloaked, darted among them, delivering the final blows. The Annihilator, its engines dead and its hull breached, limped away, followed by the remnants of its shattered armada. The Aurora, battered but alive, was escorted by the Earth vessels to a sprawling space station orbiting Earth. The station, a testament to human ingenuity, was a hive of activity, bustling with engineers, scientists, and diplomats. Juno was immediately taken to a state-of-the-art medical facility. Human doctors, working in tandem with Saurian medical experts who had arrived on a diplomatic vessel, labored tirelessly to unravel the complexities of Juno's genetic disease. Days turned into weeks as they shared data, exchanged theories, and pushed the boundaries of xenomedicine. Finally, they had a breakthrough. Using a combination of human gene therapy and Saurian bio-regenerative techniques, they were able to eradicate the disease from Juno's system. In a formal ceremony held on the station, Anthony and Juno stood side by side, representing their respective peoples. Today, Anthony declared, his voice amplified across the station, we forge an alliance, a bond of mutual support and cooperation between Earth and the Saurian people. We stand together against tyranny, against oppression, against the darkness that threatens to engulf the galaxy. Juno, her eyes gleaming with newfound hope, echoed his sentiment. The Saurians have long stood alone, no longer. We will fight alongside Earth, and together we will build a better future. News of Earth's victory and the alliance spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The Krill Confederacy, humiliated and reeling from their defeat, sent a delegation to Earth, their arrogance replaced by a grudging respect. They sued for peace, acknowledging Earth's newfound power and influence. Earth's reputation as a protector of the weak and a champion of freedom resonated with countless oppressed species. Rebellions erupted across Krill-controlled territories, inspired by Earth's example. The galaxy was changing, and Earth was at the forefront of that change. Standing on the observation deck of the space station, Anthony gazed out at the swirling tapestry of stars. He thought back to the day the meteoroid had crippled the Orion, the despair he had felt, the seemingly hopeless situation they were in. Now, looking at the galaxy before him, he realized he had found a new purpose, a new calling. He was no longer just an engineer, he was a protector, a diplomat, a beacon of hope. Juno joined him, her presence a comforting weight beside him. "What do you see, Anthony?" she asked, her voice soft. "Possibilities," he replied, "new worlds to explore, new alliances to forge, a future worth fighting for." Juno turned to him, her reptilian features softening into a smile. "You are more honorable than many within the Saurian Royal Guard," she said. "You risked everything to save me, a stranger. That is a rare quality." She paused, a flicker of emotion crossing her face. With the disease gone, and a new future ahead, perhaps I might finally be able to have a family. Anthony smiled back, a warmth spreading through his chest. He knew that their journey was just the beginning, but he also knew that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead together. Their alliance, born of adversity and forged in trust, represented a beacon of hope in a galaxy plagued by conflict and oppression. They turned to face the stars, ready to meet the future, side by side.